now? 2008, yeah. So yeah, we saw some longevity here from the trustees and serving to help our utility continue to deliver safe drinking water to our customers. So a little more on my back. Actually, I wanted to say thank you to Jessica for serving tap water. Appreciate that. That's wonderful. Great to have tap water here. A little more on my background. The State of Maine Drinking Water Program, where I was 18 years, provides regulatory oversight over all public water systems in the state. So I've had a lot of time talking to water systems all across the state before I had the opportunity to come here to the Water District in 2018. So I was on the regulatory side then, and I consider myself now on the delivery side. So now I work delivering water. Previously, I worked regulating safe water. And my career has been revolved around drinking water and helping communities have safe drinking water and how important that is. So we'll highlight a few things about Waterville, but to start, we're going to talk about what's going on in the world. And the world in general, a lot of people, and we're pretty fortunate in the United States to have safe water. So 1.4 to 1.7 million people die each year due from a lack of access to clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. So that's pretty sobering that many people die a year for a reason that's preventable. And here in Maine and across the United States generally, that is prevented. And that's a wonderful thing for us. And then 1 in 4 people lack access to safely managed drinking water, which might mean that they don't have it piped into their home. It might mean that like 106 million people drink out of untreated surface water sources. There's a lot of people in the world that don't enjoy what we enjoy. And you'll see through the presentation, in our history, people didn't enjoy what we enjoy now here. So it's an opportunity to reflect about what is different in your life because you have access to an abundant supply of safe drinking water. So what would be different in your life if you didn't have access to an abundant supply of safe drinking water? What would be different for you and your family? And we know of this, that it changes lives to have safe drinking water. So looking way back in the mid-1850s, before the Kennebec Water District was even being thought about, Dr. John Snow in England determined there was a linkage between contaminated water and disease. And this was dealt with cholera. And this is a very famous case where Dr. Snow did some study to figure out what was the source of people dying from cholera, what was the source of the transmission of cholera in the community. And so it was the start of some epidemiological studies to say, how do we pinpoint this? And so a lot of people thought it was in the air. The cholera was passed through the air, and there was something in the air. So he triangulated this by interviewing people who were sick from, family members of people who were sick. And the common source was one well, a hand pump in this part of the community called the Broad Street Pump. They removed the handle so you couldn't pump it any longer. Pretty simple solution. And cholera cases dropped. And so they surmised that the cholera was being transmitted through contaminated water. What was really, and to us would be really obvious, was the hand pump is here, and right here is a cesspool where people dumped their dirty diaper waste, and human waste was being dumped into a pit within feet of the hand pump. And so there's this really common linkage that for us today we would immediately say, oh, that's a problem. If you particularly if you have a private. Anyone here have a private well? Anyone on a private well? A few folks. but most people in the water district, if you've got a private well, you keep your septic system away from your private well. And that's in the law in the state of Maine, and it's just common practice. You don't want your septic system near your drilled well. And here, the cesspool was right next to the well, and people were getting sick. And it was like, geesh, this seems obvious to us now. It was not obvious then. And this is really, one of the foundation of linking that disease can be transmitted through contaminated water, and we need to not contaminate the water. And so some of our history in the Kennebec Water District deals with how do we prevent contamination from getting into the water, and so we'll learn more about that. So Kennebec Water District, we were formed in 1899 officially, but we protect public health and safety. We're reducing the risk of disease, and fire protection is provided through fire hydrants that we own and operate and make available to the communities. And so we've been here for a long time, and we're going to be here for much, much longer. So I've broken this presentation down into kind of three groups: past, present, and future. You'll see that the past is longer than what I'm going to say about the future, and even the present, and they all blend in together because they're all interrelated. So in the past, prior to the formation of the Kennebec Water District, there were within the community of Waterville and Fairfield and Winslow small pockets of infrastructure being constructed, cisterns, some fire hydrants were built by the Lockwood Mill. So just not interconnected pieces of infrastructure existed here. And then in the mid-1880s, the Waterville Water Company was formed, and they developed contracts with Waterville and Fairfield to supply water. That really got going about 1887. That became a more of a community system as opposed to these disconnected pieces that were in random spots, not random spot, but smaller spots in the city. And so the Waterville Water Company became the main water company in the early 1890s, but there was some concern amongst local business leaders that the Maine Water Company didn't have the best interest of the citizens in mind when they were perhaps more for a for-profit entity and more about from what I understand, they were connected with an insurance company that was more worried about buildings not burning down as opposed to public health. And of course, many water systems in the country, including here in Maine, had their origination from fire protection because the downtowns kept burning down, so let's pipe water around and well, now that there's piped water, maybe we can use that for sanitation and consumption as well. And so fire protection was a big deal. The city of Waterville had a lot of growth in the 1880s, 90s, and early 1900s. And the water district was really important in that because fire, buildings kept burning down, and in order to have investment that lasts, you need fire protection. And so having a piped system really was instrumental in helping the community to grow, as well as keeping people safe from disease. One of the original, well, he wasn't a trustee, one of the original a community member, Harvey Eaton, who Jessica has his picture up here. He was one of the founders of CMP. He actually founded Oakland Power, which later became Central Maine Power. He had this idea of the communities felt like someone should take over this water company and make it a public company, but Fairfield and Waterville didn't have the necessary debt capacity to borrow the money to take over the entity. And so he came up with the idea of a water district. And that they went to the legislature in 1899, and the legislature formed the first water district in the country. And it was really the ownership model. Who owns the water system? It's the consumers. It's much like the community is owned by the voters and the taxpayers. The water district is owned by the consumers, the ratepayers. And that was the model that he created, and that became quickly repeated in many places in the state of Maine and across the country as an ownership model. And so we brag that we're the first water district in the country. We're not the first water utility and not the first water system. We're just the first water district where we were owned by the consumers. But it wasn't enough just to create the entity. We had to have infrastructure to deliver water, and so we began the condemnation of the assets of the Maine Water Company almost immediately after the legislature passed that law, passed the legislation that created the district. So basically, by eminent domain, more or less, we took over the assets of the Maine Water Company. But what's the value of the asset? That's what took some time to figure out, and it took till 1904 for the courts to decide that those assets were worth $503,000. And if you think about what's the value of a dollar today versus what it was in 1904, according to Google, it was $36.40. $1 is now $36.40, and so $503,000 would be $18 million. And so that's a lot of investment. It's a huge investment. So the fact that $500,000, you can't get very far with pipe in the ground right now with $500,000, but $500,000 was a significant investment for the community to take on. But we're benefiting from that today because of that decision to make that investment. I forgot my notes here. What did I do with my bag? Oh, here it is. Sorry. Let me make sure I captured everything here. So the first board of trustees, Dr. Frederick Thayer, a famous doctor here in Waterville. He was the board president. Walter Wyman, he was also the co-founder of Central Maine Power. He was one of the first trustees. So Waterville and Fairfield were the first chartered communities of the Kennebec Water District. And so each community appointed 2 people, and then a fifth board member was appointed by the county commissioners, and they appointed Mr. Getchell from Winslow. So we had 2 gentlemen from Fairfield, and then Mr. Getchell appointed by the county commissioners, happened to be from Winslow because Winslow was being served, but they weren't a chartered member. And then the board appointed Mr. Boutell as the clerk, and then Harvey Eaton became the legal counsel for the board. And then Albert Hall was the superintendent for the water district. So they had an enormous challenge ahead of them. This was, again, prior to them actually having any assets to manage. They, formed the board. I'm not actually sure when Albert Hall became the superintendent, but they had a lot of work ahead of them, and there was a lot of concerns. One was water quality, but then the idea of expanding the infrastructure was also on their mind as well to help the community grow. So as I said earlier, the community was concerned about the quality of the water that was being served. And the Messaloncy Stream was the source of water there on South Street and Cool Street, where we've had offices for 100 plus years, 125 years. So that was the source of water. The Messaloncy Stream at that time was kind of on the outskirts of that portion of the Messaloncy Stream, at least, was on the, kind of on the outskirts of the development of Waterville. So it was more rural there. It was a little bit removed from the downtown. However, upstream was the town of Oakland, and all the sewage from Oakland dumped into the Messalonskee Stream and flowed down the Messalonskee Stream and into the Kennebec. And that's when we were pulling water out of the Messalonskee Stream. And that's, back to Dr. Snow and his epidemiological studies of like, where's the contamination coming from? It wasn't hard to figure out what's floating down the river. Where'd that come from? And so that there was concerns about the fact that there was sewage in the water, and so they. Even before owning the assets, they hired a consultant to look at different sources of supply. They looked at all the lakes in the region, and in 1902, the consultant recommended China Lake as the source. And one of the things that's really neat about China Lake, and it's up gradient from Waterville, and so as we'll talk about later, but you can flow by gravity from China Lake to Waterville. So that was one of the intriguing things about China Lake. And they considered it pure water. It was very pristine water. And so that was the idea. As they went through the condemnation proceedings and working with the courts, of course, one of the arguments that the Water District made, the Water District wants to pay as little as possible for these assets. So one of the arguments they made was the source is terrible, and the Water District has to go somewhere else for a source of supply. And that's a big investment. Therefore, the utility isn't as valuable as the water company is alleging. And so in 1904, when they finally came to the conclusion of the court proceeding, they took over the assets, they made a decision that even though they think China Lake is the best solution, maybe they should look into whether or not filtration of the Messalonskee Stream was the best solution for the community, rather than an 8.5-mile pipeline to China Lake, which would be a huge undertaking. And so in March of 1904, the trustees voted, and then in the minutes in the first trustee report, it says we ought to take no chances with the sewage of Oakland. And I think that's just words to live by. Just don't take any chances with anyone's sewage in your water. So a great message, and I share that with everybody that I can, that keep your sewage out of your drinking water. It's really simple. It's a beautiful message. So they did. They decided that it was time to have another source of supply. So after they took over the assets, they hired a contractor to construct a water line to China Lake. And then that supply came online in 1905, May 23rd, 1905. They had the reservoir up on the hill off from Ridge Road. They drained that down, got all the bad water out, and then they filled it up with China Lake water. And so, let me go back one here. A note here on this. In July of 1904, they contracted with a contract. They signed a contract with a contractor. They had 4 bidders. The low bid was $65,000. It didn't include the material. The Water District bought the pipe themselves and had it delivered. But the contractors, we had 4 bidders. Low bid was $65,000. The next one was $75,000. The next one was $76,000. And I don't remember the number, is $80-something thousand for the third. They didn't feel like the low bidder could do the work for $65,000, but the 75 and 76, they said, well, that's probably the right number, and could be reasonably done. And the company that bid $76,000 had more experience, and so they actually took the third highest the third lowest bid. So the $76,000 bid, and that contractor started in July of 1904 to do that work. And with it supposed to be completed by December, the interesting thing, this is 8.5 miles of pipeline with no equipment, hand dug, and I'll show you some pictures here. If we were, even with modern technology and modern equipment, 8.5 miles would not be done from July to December in pretty much any circumstance now. Obviously, construction standards are different today than it was in early 1900s, but that's ambitious. I guess is the point I'm trying to make, is that was really ambitious, and it became too ambitious. That contractor ended up failing and not able to complete the project, and the district then hired another contractor to finish the work starting in January, and went after the surety bond of the contractor. They were bonded, and so they, as far as I know, they got the funds back from the surety bond. So the district still only ended up paying out $76,000 for construction work, because the second contract was paid by the surety bond. So it took a little longer, but they did a lot of work in the winter too, which is, again, unbelievable considering it was done by hand. And so I've got a few slides here. Most of these I'll just talk about very briefly. I don't have any notes on a number of these here. But they had the pipe came in to Wiscasset on a ship and was unloaded there and then taken up to Waterville, and then the construction happened from there. So here's the picture. I'm working on the river crossing. So they did a cofferdam so that the pipeline going across the river is buried in the dirt underneath the river. So it's not just sitting on the bottom of the river. It was actually, they decided, should installed underground, which is helpful because the Kennebec, as we know, can have pretty high velocities at times, high flows, and this has protected our pipe, because this pipe is still in operation. And so a lot, like I said, a lot of hand labor. There are just a lot of very challenging circumstances to make this happen with manual labor. And here we are again, crossing the Kennebec, and dangerous situation, dangerous circumstances for the men that were working on this here. And I wonder. I'm confident the men that worked on this, and I'm sure it was all men at the time, had any idea the impact this project would have on the community 125 years later. I mean, it's just tremendous how this changed our world. Kim?
Roger, has that pipe been replaced?
Not yet. Still doing good. So, yeah, that's that piece of pipe. Yeah, I see that pipe. No, it's all in service still. All the transmission main is. We've been starting to. The transmission main, one thing, this is a cast iron pipe, and they made cast iron, some really good cast iron in the early 1900s and the 1800s, actually. The transmission main, as I said, alluded to earlier, is fed by gravity from China Lake, and it's great engineering feat there. They were able to bring that all the way from China. Elevation-wise, it works, but you got to have the right layout so you don't get airbound somewhere along the way too. And so, hats off, because we go cross country through Winslow. A lot of Winslows go from Vassboro through Winslow is all kind of cross country, and they made some decisions about this is what's going to be best, and they were right. They were absolutely right. It was just tremendous. And so we did build our treatment plant in 1993, went online. We do some pumping there now to run through the treatment process. But for 100 years, almost 100 years, it was all by gravity, and there was no pumping cost. Now, when it got to Waterville, there was a pumping cost. We had to pump to lift it up to the higher elevations in Waterville. But what a tremendous savings to the community for 100 years to not have to pump all that water. So again, some cross-country work. You can see all these men digging, a lot of hand tools, a lot of ropes and pulleys and tripods and such to move things around. A lot of really hard work to bring that pipeline through the woods, basically. Again here, some pictures. This picture here, this is through North Vassalboro, and North Vassalboro still looks the same. I mean, it's very similar. It's paved now, but it's some of these buildings are still there, and so you can see the size of the rocks that they had to pull out. Again, very hard labor to get through that. Out at the lake, we built an intake building. There's an intake that extends out into the lake, and then within this, they called it the gatehouse. There's a screen in there, keeping the fish out, basically, fish and sticks from floating down all the way to Waterville. I'm sure fish still got in because we still get fish, occasionally small fish that get into the treatment plant. and we have a better screen than they had then. And so they built this just to keep things out. There was no treatment of the water. It was just the water that was in the lake was piped into the community. And here, this is in 1905. After we were flying water from the China Lake. There was an investment in expanding the system, and they added more than 10 miles of pipe, which is a tremendous amount of pipe at that time, throughout the communities of Waterville, Winslow, and Fairfield. And so there's just some pictures of going through. The picture on the left, you can see the trolley tracks there above the trench. So those weren't removed. They just went underneath them and then backfilled back around those after the pipe was installed. But again, the tools were shovels that were used for the most part to move that. This is going up the hill in Winslow, and that seems like that looks really familiar still. So, except for the walkway, that's a nice walkway they got there. That maybe we should think about that in Winslow, but. And this is Taconic Street in Waterville. And this is crossing the Sebasticook there in Winslow. And so for our pumping, we had a water-powered pump system that was upgraded in 1905. And so there was a penstock. It might be a little hard to see there, but so the water was pumped using water to turn the pump. So the water from China Lake came down, and then we had water from the Messalonskee Stream turning a turbine that moved water up to the storage tank. And so we continued to use the Messalonskee Stream, but for a different purpose this time, not for water itself, but for the power that it was able to generate through that. And then this is a picture of our storage, our lake, storage reservoir. I think there was a picture up here that Jessica had out too of that same structure. So China Lake, a wonderful source of supply for us, and like I had said before, considered pure water. One of the things that happened let's see if I can find the date here. 1908, the Lewiston-Augusta-Waterville Street Railway opened a trolley service from Winslow to East Vassalboro. So that started on June 27th, 1908, and increased access to the lake. More people could get out to the lake and enjoy the beautiful lake. And just to, like today, we love recreation. People love houses and camps near the lake. Same thing. And the trolley just made it accessible, you know. And all of a sudden, the trustees said the sewage idea started flashing because there was no septic systems. You know, so you build a camp, you build a house, whatever, and it was maybe a cesspool, maybe a straight pipe to the lake. People don't want sewage in their camp or their home, and you know, so outhouses, cesspools, straight pipes. There's sewage involved with human activity, and the trustees became concerned. And so, in 1909, the trustees said, we need to do something about it. We need to protect this source of supply. So they bought up most of the shoreline properties, about a 200-foot buffer, all the way around the west basin of the lake. So that west basin is like the thumb of the lake here on the left side, and what you can see there in purple is land that the Kennebec Water District owns, and most of that was bought between 1909 and 1920 something, as we spent some time buying up that land. And if you go out on China Lake, if you're on the West Basin, it looks like a remote North Main lake. If you go onto the East Basin, it looks like a Southern Main lake. You know, you can see homes and camps and other buildings and property and human activity on there. And so it did exactly what they wanted to do. Protect the source of supply, keep the sewage away from the drinking water, and that's just, source water protection is something that's just so important for us today. It was important then, and the decision then to do that was tremendous, because if not for that decision, the West Basin would look exactly like the East Basin with lots of development. It would have completely changed that area. Now, some might argue that if you're from East Vassalboro, it's like, well, we could have had more houses here, more property tax, and that was a decision that was made. It was tremendous for the region, for East Vassalboro. Maybe there's some people that might feel that wasn't the best thing, but for the region, absolutely the best thing, because Waterville is certainly an economic driver for the region. And then, as you can see here on the lower left, a lot of the land around the lake, especially on the narrows in between the two basins, had a lot of agricultural activity, and there was very few trees out there. And so we planted thousands of trees on those the narrows there to restore the forest. And that's the practice today. One of the best products you get out of a well-managed forest is safe drinking water, or safe water, or clean water, I guess I should say. A well-managed forest, one of the benefits of that is clean water. And whether they intuitively thought of that then, I don't know, but planting trees was a great decision to reduce runoff into the lake, and a natural forest will preserve water quality. And then in 1931, the Water District worked with the legislature to pass a law for no bathing. And we say that's no swimming. And so some people argue, like, well, I'm not going to go take a bath in the lake. Well, we say, well, that the vernacular then, spending time in the lake swimming was often referred to as bathing. You put on your bathing suit to go into the lake. And so the legislature passed a law then that said, we want to protect the water quality. And one thing that's really important, the best source of supply for a public water system is one where there's no human activity in the watershed. That would be ideal. Now, you're never going to find, almost never going to find that ideal. because there's competing demands on that resource. But the best human activity equals degradation of water quality in almost all cases. And so reducing human activity in the lake, and particularly having people's bodies in the water, reduces the risk of disease entering the water body, which protects public health. In 1924, we built a new the electric pump station. This is the Western Avenue pump station. Was built then. Still, that building is still there. It's still functioning for us. There's different pumps in there now, but this was a great advancement. So in 1924, there was I think 3 dams on the Messalonskee Stream right there in that small area. The Kennebec Water District, CMP, and I'm not sure who the other entity was that owned that, got together and one dam was created there, and we owned that. We became the owner of that dam, and but that generated power for us to pump water, and so that we just sold that dam back in 2019 because it needed a lot of investment, and we weren't in the hydroelectric business, and so the trustees made a decision to separate ways with that, and Messalonskee Stream Hydro owns that dam along with the 3 other dams that are on the Messalonskee Stream as well. But we spent a long time working with that. CMP did take ownership of it, and then we got it back when CMP had to divest themselves of all power generation in the 1990s. I think it. All right. So, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, from 51 to 65, lots of expansion of the water system, post-war housing boom, and we added that small intake building that was built out at the lake. We put a new building out there, and we started adding chlorine to the water. So that was the first time in the early 50s that we actually added any chemical. In 1965, we started adding fluoride to the water as well. We put a parallel transmission main from the lake to North Vassalboro, and put a pump station there so that we could pump and create a distribution system off from that pump station. So the transmission main and the water pressure in the transmission main in Vassalboro is very low because it's just flowing by gravity. And we put this pump station in and added some pipe and distribution pipe in Vassalboro so we could serve the residents in Vassalboro. Because before that, we weren't serving anyone in Vassalboro. And so we put in a pump station to boost the pressure up so it could be distributed in North Vassalboro area. We took our reservoir that was up on the hill and made it a 40 million gallon reservoir. And something I didn't mention before was that this 40 million gallon reservoir, as well as the other one, was just open to the atmosphere for the ducks to land in, the geese to land in, and whatever. There was less concern about, we were just pulling it from the lake anyway, originally, and so what does it matter if it's open to the atmosphere? And so that changed in the early 90s, but 40 million gallons of storage is a lot of storage. That's an enormous finished water storage tank or reservoir. And then from 66 to 89, a number of improvements were made. We put in some new pumps, some updated electric pumps into the Western Avenue pump station. We built a maintenance garage there on South Street. We put a transmission main from the parallel transmission main we had from the lake to North Vassalboro. We continued that all the way into Western Avenue in 1970. And we did some expansion of the water distribution system again. We added a storage tank on Taylor Road in Winslow, and which we don't actually use anymore because we have so much storage in Waterville. And then we created the high pressure zone that really went from Inland Hospital up KMD to Oakland. Put a tank in, and so we put it on Chase Avenue. We have a pump station there, and so we increased the pressure there, so that would better serve that area of the community. And then, but the late 1970s, the water quality in China Lake went downhill. It's really around 1980. We had a lot of algae blooms. The water quality was really poor, and China Lake became famous and was known nationally from the term of China Lake syndrome. You had this pristine lake that suddenly just switched to a eutrophic lake with lots of algae blooms, and that became a topic of environmental conversations across the country because it changed so quickly. And we were still serving that water. We added chlorine, but we subsequently had a lot, especially in the summertime when there was algae growth, a lot of taste and odor complaints. The water didn't smell very good, it didn't taste very good, and people were frustrated. So the trustees started looking at treatment in the late 80s to deal with that. The Safe Drinking Water Act changed in the Congress amended the original Safe Drinking Water Act was 1974. That was amended in 86. That said surface water. If you're pulling water from a surface water, you've got to filter that water. Now there are some subtle exemptions to that exist from some utilities and some utilities in Maine, but everyone had to start filtering their water. And so not only did we have these taste and odor issues that were frustrating people, there was now a federal regulation that said you're going to have to do something about the water quality, and you're going to have to cover your storage tank. And putting a cover over a 40 million gallon tank reservoir was not possible, not financially feasible. We built 2 6 million gallon tanks up on the hill there as well. So we created a treatment process. Again, that was the first time we had to pump in the life of the water utility. And so this is a little schematic. We won't try to get into that. If you're interested in a tour of the water system, or the treatment plant, you can let me know. Talk to me today. You can call the water district, or contact me some other time, and we can schedule that. But this is our treatment plant, and it's the same treatment process. There's some newer components within it, but the same basic treatment process exists in there. In 2017, we upgraded the Western Avenue pump station. It was in dire need of an upgrade, and so we just did that. And so I'm calling that the past, because that's kind of where I step in as the general manager in 2018. So that was the past. Now, the next segment is the present, and so the present is a few years wide here, but. So the first thing about the present is that here's the team that's doing all the great work at the Kennebec Water District, making sure that you have a supply of water to your home and business every day. So we've got 28 employees, including myself, and we have 10 trustees now. It's a great team. It's a privilege to lead them and help them be successful, and great things are happening. So we in 2023 we occupied our new building on Drummond Avenue. We were on Cool Street and South Street. We sold our Cool Street building. South Street, we sold the garage. We still own the kind of the office building on South Street. But we'd been there a long time. But it was time to have a complex that could meet our needs for the future. And so we have a wonderful building that we can put all of our equipment in a building now, and is a tremendous resource for us. So our distribution system, just to highlight, we have 18 miles of transmission main, because we had 8.5 miles each way. Actually, maybe that's 17. Maybe I should revise this slide. But parallel lines, and then 154 miles of distribution main. So if you think about that, so it's about 172 miles. If you drove from Waterville to Holton, that's about 172 miles. And so It's a lot of pipe under the ground. You know, so most of our distribution system infrastructure is buried, and so we have to maintain that buried infrastructure. And then about 644 hydrants. And we do a lot of water main replacement. When I would say, you know, although this is general terms, the first 100 years, everything was new going in. And now all that new stuff is old stuff, or most of that new stuff is old stuff anyway. And so we're in the era now of replacing pipe, and there's a lot of pipe to replace. And so there's, you know, the needed investment there is significant. We do public fire, we provide fire protection. The photo there of the fire department working on the fire at the last Unicorn. They had lots of water, and that was great because they were able to save the buildings. The fire department did a tremendous job there, but it was our water they used to save the buildings adjacent to that. And the China Lake, 32 square miles of watershed, 32 billion gallons of water in that lake, and the deepest part is 85 feet. On the East Basin, 452 out of the 529 shoreline lots are developed. On the West Basin, there's only 2 lots that are not owned by us. So pretty significant legacy there. We go out and sample on the lake regularly to determine the water quality. And we, we do some education outreach. We offer tours of the treatment plant. We have stuff on our website. Trying to see what's going on here. We do, for water quality sampling, we do about 10,000 samples per year to make sure the water is safe. And some of those, you know, a lot of those samples are done at our lab, at our treatment plant. We're doing analyses out there all the time. And you know, some of that gets sent to certified labs. We have a certified lab. We're really certified for bacteria. We send other samples out to other certified labs. But we're doing a lot to measure the water quality to make sure the water you receive in your home and business is safe to drink. So the future, we're kind of in the future here too. And as I talk about PFAS, anyone heard of PFAS, forever chemicals? Unfortunately, there is PFAS in China Lake. Again, this is the idea of if we had no human activity around China Lake, there would be no PFAS. If there's PFAS in your source of supply, it only comes from human activity because it's a human-made chemical. And so human activity around China Lake has resulted in PFAS in China Lake. It's just above what is considered the safe level. I don't know if that's a good way to say that, but 4 parts per trillion is the new regulatory standard, and we're at 3.5 to 5.5 parts per trillion in the lake. And so we're doing some work to mitigate that and upgrading our treatment plant, and we've gotten $8 million in federal grants that will help aid that project. And so that's coming in the future. We're right in the throes of that right now. So over the next couple of years, we'll be finalizing that work. PFAS related also, do we expand to Fairfield? Is that in our future?
Yes, please.
I got 1 vote. And it's a matter of funding. Who's going to pay for it? The existing ratepayers are not going to pay for that. So who else is going to invest money, and should that happen? Continuing to replace aging infrastructure. We've got a lot of infrastructure that needs to be replaced. And it's really expensive. The project that we've done on Summer Street this year, that we did about 1 mile of pipe replacement there, and that was about $4 million. So if you, in town work, you know, it's $3.5, $4 million to replace pipe per mile. And so if you remember, we had 154 miles of pipe. That's a lot of pipe. That's a lot of money. And so there's a need for investment, and that translates to rates, water rates, unfortunately. But that's reality, is that if you need to replace things, someone has to pay for it. So that goes to the next question is, what is the value of safe and reliable drinking water? And that's for us, it's priceless. And ours isn't priceless. We don't charge unlimited. But anyway, so that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions. We've got a great team that's doing great work trying to supply safe drinking water every day to you. And it's a trust that we know is sacred, because my wife and my wife is here with me tonight, and we live in Winslow. We drink the water. Our kids drink the water. Our grandson, who's living with us now, is drinking the water. Our children all grew up drinking the water. It's important. It's really important, and we try to take that really seriously every day. So thank you. Tom.
In the 90s, when you built that 36-inch parallel transmission line from North Castlegar Road to Western Avenue, do you have to go under the riverbed, or is that part of the bridge construction? How did you get the pipe across?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I know. I don't know the answer to that, actually, and that I don't. It is parallel to the existing transmission main, and I guess I don't know if we buried that. I assume we did, but I don't know that definitively, actually. So, good question.
We have been in a period of severe drought.
Yes.
For a while. And I just wonder if, looking ahead, the expectation is it will reoccur and probably more intensive in the future. What challenges does that provide, if any, to our system in terms of quality and quantity?
Yeah, good question. So, interestingly, the water quality in China Lake has improved since the 80s. I don't know if anyone has property out on the lake or spends time out on the lake, but a lot of effort has gone into reducing. The issue with the lake is phosphorus. The nutrient phosphorus is what feeds the algae. And so lots of effort has gone into reducing the amount of phosphorus going into the lake, and it has improved the water quality. This year in particular, for many reasons, the water quality was tremendous out at the lake. Even though the temperature might have been a little higher than average, we had no algae blooms that were recorded, and the clarity of the water was exceptional all summer long. So in this particular drought, we had exceptional water quality, and so whether in a future drought that same thing holds true, to be determined. Our China Lake, they did an evaluation sometime in the past about what we'd call the safe yield. How much water could you take from the lake and it not have adverse impact? And the estimate then was 20 million gallons a day, and we currently take 3 or 4. In the early 90s, when we built the treatment plant was built for 12 million gallons a day production, and we were producing 7 to 8, sometimes 9 million gallons a day. Huhtamaki was taking water only from us. They subsequently went to the river for their processed water, although they've been back on us, but now they're back to the river. Scott Paper was in business and taking a lot of water from us, and there was some other industry in Waterville that was taking water. And so we've reduced, if you think about the need to conserve water, we've conserved from, say, 7 or 8 million gallons to 3 to 4 million gallons. So conservation-wise, if those industries were in place still, we'd be taking 7 to 8 million gallons of water a day without any adverse impact, because we could take 20. The fact that we're taking 3 or 4 and the safe yield is 20, we're in an exceptionally good spot for weather in a drought. when another one comes, because there will be other dry periods. And so we don't have to, I'm not saying we don't worry about it, but we don't worry about it, you know, because we have a tremendous source, and given the demands on our utility for water use, it's easily done, even in a dry period. Other utilities that might use a well for their source of supply, and certainly private well owners, have felt that impact of the drought this year that we have not observed. So, yeah.
How do you determine, I'm assuming that it's cheaper to replace the pipes than it is to wait for them to burst and then go into emergency action to replace the pipe. Is that true?
That's true. Yes.
But how do you determine which ones you're going to do? Is it by population density? Is it, do you do them all in the same neighborhood? Like, how do you pick which neighborhood you're going to do?
Yeah, so it depends on whether the city is going to pave that street.
Yeah.
Because if we can do it in conjunction with a paving project, it saves us a little bit of money.
Like
And-
Main Street during COVID?
Yeah, Main Street during COVID was being reconstructed. Summer Street is going to be paved next year in Waterville, and the city has allowed us to put in kind of a minimal amount of pavement back, and so we've saved maybe a couple $100,000 in construction costs by doing it in time with the paving project. So the paving projects we use that a lot to make decisions. Of course, we only replace pipe that needs to be replaced. You know, how do I know? Well, you know, yeah, good question. So like on Pleasant Street, that water line was kind of a backbone to our system, but it was very tuberculated. So there's rust nodules in the pipe that reduced the flow capacity, and we needed more flow in that pipe. And so we wanted to replace Pleasant Street so more water could flow from the Western Avenue pump station north towards Hutamaki and towards our tanks. Summer Street, we had main breaks on that, and it was, you know, the interesting thing about most of the pipes that we're replacing now have never been replaced before. You know, when's the last time you replaced the pipe on this street? Well, never, actually. So and when's the next time you replace it? Long after you're dead, you know. And so, you know, in all cases, you know, we're seeking a 100-year life. So it's, you know, often it's about main break or capacity. You know, it's frequency of main breaks and capacity. So if we have a side street that has some main breaks that the breaks aren't very disruptive, you know, in a neighborhood or something, that's not as high a priority if the breaks are on like Kennebec Memorial Drive, and where a main break is very disruptive and, you know, puts a lot of other things at risk. So we did what we call a master plan in 2018, and we've been working off from that. It's time to renew that to establish our future priorities. But we're looking at main breaks, looking at what the cities and towns are doing for paving projects, the age of the pipe, the flow capacity of the pipe.
What's the pipe made of these days?
Ductile iron. That's what. Well, it's like cast iron, but it's different refinement process. So it has a little bit of flexibility to the metal. Cast iron is very rigid, and ductile iron is supposed to have a little more flexibility. You know, so when the earth moves, you know, you can. A lot of our main breaks is a result of frost. Not that there's frost that deep, but frost in the higher levels just causes the earth to shift a little bit. And it's a very subtle shift, and it's not like, oh, I felt that. You know, you would never feel it. But the pipe that's 6 feet down, you know, and it's old, there's just a little shift. Oh, you know, as you get older, you get stiffer. And so does this cast iron, and that's where the cracks happen. And so old pipe was, you know, until the 70s, it was cast iron. Some was lined cast iron. We have lined ductile iron pipe, so it's a cement mortar lined ductile iron pipe. That cement lining prevents the rust from forming inside the pipe. So you maintain the capacity, the flow capacity of the pipe, and then it's this I don't want to call it, it's steel, I guess. It's not, it's ductile iron. It's not steel, I guess. A metallurgist might come up with a better word for me here, but
Sourced domestically, or are they made?
it's all domestic, actually. And some of the funding that we've been getting recently requires us to use domestic pipe anyway. But we've been very successful getting a lot of grants through the funding sources. We've been getting since 2020, all of our pipe projects, we've gotten 25 to 35% grant on those projects, and our loan rate's about 1%. And so we've doing what we can to reduce the financial impact where we can. So, question.
I have a question. I have heard from other people, and somebody that actually works for another water company, that if the water main breaks, sometimes the road can just collapse. The pavement, everything. Is there any, how do people like us, how are we protected against that happening to us? Like a sinkhole type of scenario?
Yeah.
I
So.
mean, is this what the pumping station can monitor for safety purposes as we drive, or is there no warning when this happens? But these pipes are so old.
Well, I think it's possible to have no warning, but generally, if there's water in the street, bubbling up in the street, because that's a good indication that there's a broken water main. And we have a wonderful community. People call us, I think you got a water main break. Oh yeah, we do. and so certainly, if you see water bubbling up from the ground in the middle of the road, and there's just water going everywhere, don't drive over that. Take another route, because it could collapse. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot. Sometimes we had a break on West River Road a few weeks ago on a Sunday, and it's a 12-inch pipe, and there was a big hole in the pipe, and a lot of water was coming out, and there was a lot of pavement damage, and so that happens, and and we get out there, and we turn down the valves and slow down the flow and reduce further damage, but until we get out there, I mean, it's not financially feasible to have some kind of monitoring system that would alert us, and we would be first responders, kind of like firefighters sleeping in the building, and get out there in 2 minutes. And so pavement damage does happen for sure.
But that would be mainly if the water is going down the side of the road?
Well, if the pavement is going to collapse, there's going to be water surfacing, guaranteed. I mean, it would be if the gravel underneath the road is being eroded away, the water is surfacing. We've had leaks, small leaks, that have not surfaced, and they may be going into a ditch near away from the pavement. That's harder to identify. But if there's pavement being undermined, there's water coming to the surface.
You seem to be talking mostly about the distribution, the end product.
Yeah.
What about under the lake? Have you ever had any problems there?
What do you mean by under the lake?
Well, when you said the pipes were under the lake and were coming, or was it just the river?
It's just the riverbed. I mean, we have a water line, like our intake line is sitting on the bottom of the lake that goes out. There's two actually. We have a parallel lines into the lake. We only use one of those now, but there's a structure there that's got a screen on to keep the big fish out, and then that just flows by gravity underground to the intake building. The intake building has a vault in the bottom that you can access the screens and stuff with. So because it doesn't come to the surface there, it's still buried.
What you're saying to me sounds like a tremendously expensive thing to do if you build cracks or something that big.
Yeah, everything's expensive. Yeah, we actually, for our intake and our storage tanks, where particularly the intake, as you're talking about, we have divers inspect that every 5 or 6 years just to check on to see. Because we wouldn't notice if it was, the water, as long as the water is flowing, we wouldn't know that there's some kind of failure that might happen unless we had divers inspect that. So we do that we're going to do it next year, actually. The cycle is time next year. And we'll have those same divers after they've cleaned their gear, will go into our storage tanks. So, good question.
Yeah, thank you. You explained that mystery that I've had since I was a kid in the 50s.
Oh, great.
We would sometimes go out in the summer to East Vassalboro, and you were not allowed to swim in the lake. You could
Yeah.
only fish. But if you went to China, there was a place you could swim in the lake.
Yeah.
It was sort of a beach, but not the way there were no facilities. Like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking that there was another beach on Escalante called Banks Beach.
Yeah.
And that was like a miniature Olympic beach with all these things.
Oh, yeah.
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 But I guess I understand how you control it. But my question now is this: with all the amount of water you take out of every day, how does it replenish itself? Are there underground springs which lead China Lake?
Yeah, so it rains in Maine a lot, and it is a lot of natural groundwater is coming. You know, water goes downhill, you know, all the time, and so higher elevation, the water percolates into the groundwater, and that discharges into the lake, and then that flows out of the outlet stream out of the lake. You know, but your point about the swimming, you can still swim on the east side. The water is flowing to the west side. What we have with no swimming in the West Basin is risk reduction. We can't eliminate all risks, but we're reducing the risk of